for the conversation. Hello.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
In a while.
Good afternoon. It's been a
Yeah.
while.
It's wonderful to be here with you again, after so many collaborations in the past. So we're going to start by screening domino effect. So, Donna, Jonathan, neither of you were born in Panama, yet you have become amongst the best known artists from that country. How did you end up in Panama? How did your collaboration come about?
I can start with the first part of that. I grew up in the United States. I grew up in Texas. Um, Thanks to the fact that my grandparents emigrated from Mexico to the United States when that was still a thing people could do. When I was in my 20s, I moved to Panama in 1994. So half of my life, the first half of my life was spent in the United States. The second half of my life so far has been here in Panama in my adopted country. And I originally came here because my husband, who's a biologist, had the opportunity to study tropical insects here, and we came and we both really fell in love with Panama for many different reasons.
Okay. What about you, Jonathan?
Well, right when Donna was moving to Panama, I was leaving for college from here. I had moved originally to Panama in 1986 after living a brief period in the United States, first in New York and then in Florida with my mother. I, but I was born in Ecuador. But I started visiting Panama in 1980 because my father moved here from Ecuador, but he's Colombian. So I triangulated and in a very sort of in a in a way and wound up here just I don't know just randomly I guess. Um,
And how did you meet, and when did you decide to collaborate as artists?
So we never actually decided. It just sort of happened. We met in a period of time that was really interesting culturally for Panama in the early 2000s. Sort of a rebirth renaissance that I think was not unconnected with Panama regaining complete control of all of its territory, including the canal. There was a group of artists, filmmakers, writers, musicians that would all get together. And, I think I met you, Jonathan, at a party or, at some sort of event like that, art event, whatever. And we had seen each other's work and didn't know each other that well. And sort of somehow on instinct, I remember saying to you, I'm going to this place that is really weird and interesting, and I think you might enjoy it. Do you want to come with me? And you were like, yeah, next time you go, like, take me along. Um, and that place was this really weird, beautiful glass fabrication plant on the outskirts of Panama. So they had these mountains of glass separated by color within the actual mountains um, right behind that. And so it just visually was pretty incredible. So we went on kind of a field trip excursion without any particular plan. Um, and then Jonathan took his video camera. I don't know if you want to pitch in on the story, but Jonathan I had my still camera because I was taking a lot of photos at that point, and Jonathan took his video camera, and we each did our own thing. But then one of the things Jonathan did was start breaking glass and throwing glass and stuff in front of the camera. And then later we looked at that and said, oh my goodness, we have to go back and make this into a video. So it was totally spontaneous from just meeting in this environment, going someplace together and then looking at kind of the same things. I think we were looking through a lot of the same lenses metaphorically.
Right. And when talking about the video we just saw, um, as the progression of bricks, fall into each other as a domino, you see the urban environment of Panama. And in the 90s and the beginning of this century, Panama experienced an incredible transformation, a phase of urban development fueled by all kinds of monies. And many of your works, like Domino Effect, Urban Phantoms, or video games, deal with this devastating effect of so-called progress on patrimonial buildings and neighborhoods. What exactly happened in Panama, and how did you experience it as citizens and as artists?
I think a lot of what happened in Panama during the early 2000s, the stage was set during the 90s, which pretty much began with the invasion of Panama, the U.S. invasion of Panama, which toppled the military dictatorship that Noriega was the head of. But somehow it also brought in sort of the more savage, neoliberal, privatizing forces. So a lot of state-run companies were privatized during the 90s. A lot of key factors were set into motion that sort of led to the sort of this frenzied sort of real estate boom, which was tied to all this building construction and they were, which didn't pay much heed to zoning codes or to any cultural or architectural value or humanistic or value that certain neighborhoods could and did have. And so everybody was just in this huge building casino, bling 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 bling, speculating, and things and huge condominium towers were just springing up left and right, and they were demolishing these beautiful homes built in the 30s and the 40s, and leveling entire blocks, really. And it happened so rapidly and so ferociously that it was sort of impossible to ignore. So we started making work about it. And Donna
Well, and
was living.
we both
Donna
lived,
was
we both
living in one of
lived,
those neighborhoods.
we both lived in this area that was sort of the heart of some really serious transformation. That also they started at this period of time, they started changing the density regulations of lots one after the other. And it's sort of like the dominoes. It was by the time people realized what effect this was going to have on the local infrastructure, it was sort of too late for any one, domino to stop the chain. But both of us at that time, we both moved away from that area not long after. But at that time, we both lived very much in the heart of this. And you mentioned real estate speculation, which was the main driving force, but money laundering was very important also in the out of control building. And when in 2008, 2009, when the rest of the world sort of went on pause because of the economic crisis, here it didn't hit so hard because money laundering wasn't harmed by banking regulation, but also the banks here always had very strict policies on loans. So things diminished a little bit, building and construction diminished a little bit, but it didn't stop, it kept going. So that the city has just continued to expand since then.
And you use the materials from the construction debris in order to do the video, right?
In part, we were fascinated by how beautiful the objects were that we could find. We went into these demolition sites, both building demolition sites, home demolition sites, and you could still find entire tiles, entire wall murals left because they were solid, good, well-made old objects. And we were like, it was part of what was so sad about none of these things being protected or appreciated. And in the case of Efecto Domino effect that we just saw, this was a project in the old quarter of Panama where they repaved all the streets. They took out these beautiful old cobblestones and replaced them with inferior quality new stones, in part just to make it new, and in part it was one of the personal money laundering projects of Ricardo Martinelli, who was later charged with money laundering and fraud and what else?
And all these money entering the economy created, a sort of solid economy, but it's not paired with a solid cultural scene, at least on the institutional part, And Central America has always been what I call a zone of silence, overlooked by even curators interested in Latin America. And ignored by the art establishment at large. But there have been important initiatives like Teoretica, the incredible work done by Virginia Perez Raton in Costa Rica, the Museum of Contemporary Art in Panama, which has been experienced a renaissance, and it's expanding as we speak. Also, the País Biennial in Guatemala, which was overhauled and it became a curated show with wonderful curators participating in it. And then a few galleries like Diablo Rosso um, and Proyectos Ultravioleta in Guatemala. There were two biennials, the Central American Biennial and several biennials in different countries. So there have been initiatives, but somehow, you feel that there still lacks more institutional support. Can you talk about the contemporary art scene in Panama?
One
You want
thing
to
I
get that
think
one
it's
down?
Yeah, I'll start. One thing I think it's important to highlight is absolute lack of institutional support. But one thing that the emerging artists right now are doing is making things happen anyway. So there was a very active scene when Jonathan and I were starting, then there was a little bit of a lull, and now there's a super vibrant emerging artist scene with a group of incredible artists, and they're having pop-ups and open studios and events in spaces that are temporary, and they're basically, I think they're doing something really important. They're not waiting for the institution. Not to take anything away from the Museum Diablo Rosso, which are playing a very important role, but they can't do everything. And I think it's very important right now that the emerging artists are making their own thing happen. The other thing is it's kind of a blessing to be overlooked, because when nobody's paying attention to you, you just go right about doing your own thing. And, fad or not fad, it doesn't really matter because nobody's paying attention. So you just make your work.
Jonathan?
I agree with everything Donna said. Yeah, I mean, I was also going to mention that aside from Teoretica and in Costa Rica and Proyectos Ultravioleta and all these that you mentioned, there's a lot of like artist initiatives. I know that, for example, Adán Vallecillo in Honduras has been spearheading a lot of sort of collective sort of projects where I think a residency program on an island and also near his home. I forget the names. I'm very bad with names, and there's also Simon Vega has a residency program. He's another artist. He's based in El Salvador, and they sort of
And Federico Herrero also had a residency program. Yeah, it's all the artists themselves more than the institutions, although, institutions are also making efforts to be more responsive.
It's been a little bit of everything, and that's necessary because the state and also private enterprise have really been absent for the most part. And when they're not absent, there's always strings attached. They have their own agendas, and obviously they're willing to give you money, but then they want something in return, and that quid pro quo can sometimes sort of push the artists in directions they normally wouldn't want to go. Or there's a certain bit of sort of soft censorship also associated with that. Or sort of they have this need to produce outcomes that are marketable or that are somehow favorable to their sort of their image or their marketing schemes, I guess, and that winds up harming more than helping sometimes, So you have to sort of learn to maneuver within, all this in this environment, right? But then, that's par for the course. I mean, and
Yeah.
that doesn't happen only in Latin America; it happens everywhere. I mean, I think we're a lot artists all over the world are sort of dealing with a lot of the same issues, whether they're in the periphery or in the centers of the major capitals of art. You always have this sort of push and pull because we're all living within this sort of abominable market scheme. and yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
it's just
Well, Donna just mentioned an important topic, which is this complicated relationship between Panama and the United States. And I thought it would be a good moment to screen Drinking Song, which addresses precisely this complex relationship. Okay. Well, this is a work that holds dear to my heart because it was commissioned for the Mercosul Biennial when I was the artistic director. And it's a humorous take on symbols of nationality, in this case, the American national anthem, which happens to be at its origins a British bar song. Can you speak about the work? Have you had any nationalistic pushback whatsoever? Is there any regulation regarding anthems, as there are several regarding flags?
It's funny that you asked that because I've never even thought about if there were any regulations. If there are, nobody has held us to task. What's kind of amusing is people here and in other countries, not just the United States, kind of hum along in spite of themselves, I think. Thank you again for inviting us to be in the Bienal de Mercosul, because that was our excuse and our budget for being able to make the piece.
Yeah.
For being able to make the piece. And you also prompted us with your the curatorial aspect of the biennial, which was about geopoetics and about what a nation state means, what country delineation, border frontera means. And Jonathan and I went straight to the ironic of, national symbols are just like logos, and the nation state is an artifice and a construction. And we could talk for probably at least an hour about this piece, but Jonathan, were we already talking about the Cerveza Panama before this? Like how strange it was that there was a Panama named beer, like a beer named after the country.
And also,
I know I had been thinking about it for a while. Yeah, it just I had noticed, because I drink so much beer, that it was really strange to have a beer that had the name of a country. Like if you could imagine, like Cerveza Colombia or United States America beer, So I started thinking about that, and then I noticed that the other beers from that are produced here, which were at one point they were national companies, but they've been bought out by foreign corporations, but they had names like Soberana, which means sovereign, and then Balboa is sort of like a founding father. So it'd be sort of like having like a George Washington or a Thomas Jefferson beer, or a, I don't know. And
But
then there was
Balboa
another.
was a Spanish conquistador, so he's a national symbol that's completely, upside down in its justification. And we have a Balboa Avenue, we have a Balboa School. The money here is the Balboa, and so Balboa is like embraced as this. It's that beer alone is very ironic
Problematic
for
to
its
say the
name.
least. Yeah,
So this
Well,
is
yeah,
so there's already colonialism implied in the Balboa beer.
right.
And so, whereas if you go to neighboring countries like Costa Rica, the beers are sort of this generic, like Imperial or Bavaria, has something more to do with the history of beer making, European beer making. Where they reference Germany and that sort of thing, or they're called Pilsen. The beers here were somehow tied to national identity, and I think it had to do with the fact that Panama has always been living sort of in the shadow of this, of the United States, which has, which had a colonial enclave for more than 100 years here, or just about 100 years. So there's this sort of inferiority complex, and you need to reassert national identity through the beer brands, right? And we always talked about Frank Zappa quote, like to be a true country, you need to have at least three things, like a football team or a soccer team, nuclear weapons, and at least a beer, one beer or two beers,
Well, you
something
have
like
two
that.
of
I mean,
them.
and so when you invited us to participate, I think we had already been talking about making a piece along those lines. But what we didn't know was that the United States national anthem was the sort of a drinking song, sort of the emblematic drinking song that the members of the Anacreontic Society is what it was called. It was a gentleman's club in London in the 18th century, founded in the 18th or 17th century. And it's the exact same melody, but they changed the lyrics. Francis Scott Key changed the lyrics. And it's just curious to me because the United States really hasn't changed all that much. It's still a white man's gentleman's club in many ways, right? Or they want to keep it that way. That's what they mean by make America great again. It's like, let's go back to this time when, all white men allowed, only white men allowed.
I couldn't believe it when we found this song because, I went to public schools. I grew up in the US. I went to public schools and we always heard about Francis Scott Key wrote the national anthem, but nobody ever talked about the tune being stole from a British drinking song. I guess it's too shameful, so they don't talk about it.
We're running a little late, so let's
Oh
go
yeah, okay.
to the next video.
All right. Well, you guys look up that tune.
The Hirshhorn has this video titled Tropical Zincphony in its collection. And mangoes, which can be seen, they are tropical fruit, can be seen as stand-ins for individuals trying to get an edge on each other, trying to aiming to get to the finish line faster. So, and tin, in this case, zinc, tin roofs are typical of low-income neighborhoods in the global south. So these are mangoes, in this scalding hot tin roof or zinc roof, trying to get, away from their collective fate. Sound is key to this work, as the mangoes hit the tin roof and create a symphony, as the pun in the title suggests, of tropical bodies in movement. The body also talks about migration because mangoes are not native to the Americas. They were brought by the Portuguese from Asia. So they all talk about this bodies in movement. Can you talk about this work and how it was put together? Because it's quite a feat of production, I feel.
The process for coming up with the idea was about as spontaneous and organic as our very first video. It came about during one day. Jonathan was out for a walk and saw a very sort of improvised tin roof on a building and called me immediately and said, this crumpled tin is really beautiful. We should do something, like maybe roll something on it. And I was like, yeah, okay, I'm busy, I gotta go. And then later in the day, we had a mango tree next to where we live, and there was a boom, and my twin sons both went running out to get the mango because that boom on zinc meant a mango had fallen off the tree. And so I called Jonathan right away and I said, mangoes. And that was we had conceived the piece there in between two very short conversations. And then the production, first thing that occurred to us was, getting permission to get up on people's houses and all that. And it sounded really complicated. And luckily, a friend suggested to us, what about, going out to that guy that makes sculpture with scrap out in the interior and seeing if, maybe you can use his scrap metal out there, which is what we did. So there's a very unique fellow out in Capira, a little town outside of Panama, that makes big sculptures out of chatarra, out of metal, and he rented us his zinc for $300, and we were able to go. And so the very first scene is actually filmed on a rooftop that we climbed up on scaffolding and got onto. And the rest of it, we made these little theaters, these little stages with what we could. And then it was actually one of the most fun videos I think we've ever made, because then it was just like, what can we make happen? What's possible here? How can the mango move? And there's one scene where we literally were like, oh, let's see if we can do like a skate ramp, and the sound, Jonathan, do you want to take the sound? It's not only important here, but in all the videos, but thank you for mentioning that.
Yeah, the sound is more than 50% of the work a lot of the time, and in video work it's so important because since the image is this sort of two-dimensional flat thing, but what really occupies space and what gives you a lot of information about sort of weight, heft, and texture, and is more tactile is sound, because it actually it's touching you. It's vibrations through the air that eventually reach your ears and physically touch you, and it helps create atmosphere in a way that images can't on their own. And when we started working, I was sort of really preoccupied with trying to emphasize sound, to capture sound as well as possible, because I had seen so much video work that was interesting on a visual plane, but then when shown in a public space, where it has to be amplified, it was really lacking. and works that I thought, oh wow, that would have been really such an excellent piece. It really fell flat on their face because the artist had really completely sort of ignored or descuidar, ¿cómo se dice?
Uh, sorry, and neglect.
Neglect.
Neglected to pay attention to the sound. So and we kept sort of upping the stakes with every video that we made, and so working with sound technicians during the recording, and also doing a lot of sound post-production, trying to eliminate anything that we didn't want. It's just like we would carefully frame everything. And so, for example, all you see here is just zinc and mangoes, right? And anything else is just extraneous information that doesn't really contribute to why have it be in the frame. So, for example, we were shooting next to the Pan American Highway, and we would have to sort of wait till the traffic died down, that there wasn't any like loud trucks or traffic, or if there was a plane flying overhead, we would have to wait, because that's just a distraction. We don't want it in there. And if we did happen to record it, we would work with sound technicians to eliminate those frequencies so that they're not there, because everything that's in the work, intentionally or not, is people are going to sort of try to derive meaning from it or interpret it. Why is it there, right? And if it's not your intention to have something in there, it could confuse people or distract them or take away from what you really wanted to say or imply or have people feel with the work. So so sound is really important. It's an audiovisual medium. In Spanish, audiovisual, and it's like audio is first, even though like most of the emphasis is always on the visual. Yeah. But I think that's like a hint as to like, hey, if we're saying audio first, then don't forget about it. Take care of it.
Pay attention. Yeah. So in the recording process, the technical part, this is all very simple. Like we just set up these pieces of zinc, like however we could, and I had a video camera, very basic, like. But we did have a friend who's a sound producer come with a boom microphone, and so just out of the frame of the camera there was a directional microphone, so that from the beginning we had the sound as good as possible. So that's a pretty common thing. The Efecto Domino also, there was a boom microphone just out of the frame so that the sound would just be the tick, 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 tick of the physical, so you get the physical properties of the object.
And also, like, these are sound professionals, so they follow and they do this panning movement, right? So when you see the work in the space, you have the real sensation that from the bricks, the sound is also panning from left to right. So it's sort of it's a lot more visceral, the experience, and there's a lot of panning work also with this video with the mango work, and sound is just completely spatial. It could be left or right, it could be in the front, it could be in the back, and it gives you a lot more information about what is happening that you don't perceive. A lot of people don't really think about it. It's not like this conscious thing, but anybody that's a film buff knows that sound work is just like essential to the cinema. That's why there's so much preoccupation with your surround sound and THX sound and so forth. And it I think it's changed a lot. I think a lot, when we started Donna, there was a lot less emphasis on the sound part of video art. And I think that, at least in my experience, from what I've seen, it's been getting better. Technically, at least, because there's more access to equipment and to people that work with sound, just like it's a lot easier to get like a really, really amazing camera that has good optics. It's a lot cheaper and more accessible to get, really high fidelity, robust sound recording equipment. So I guess that's a good thing.
You've had more than 15 years of fruitful collaboration, no pun intended, but you've also had your own careers on the side, or not on the side, in addition to your collaboration. So let's put one of Donna's videos and talk about that. Wow. I'm always amazed when I see this work. It's one of my favorite artworks in the last, years, bar none. And yeah, you were trained as a biologist originally. Can you talk about how this project came about and how it relates to other projects that you're currently doing?
Thanks. Yeah, it comes directly from having studied biology. So my individual work and the collaborations, almost always the original idea or inspiration comes from something that I see directly in life or some real life experience. And when I was studying biology, I was involved in a bird banding project, and we caught and recaptured birds and would mark them with a little bracelet, identifying bracelet, and take basic data. And it was part of this big demographic study. But oftentimes, after you got done very carefully handling a bird, it could be free to go and it wouldn't go right away. It would be sort of stunned or playing dead. Nobody seemed to know. And that was, years ago, but I remembered that image later, and I thought, this is an image for our time. The idea of a rebirth like the phoenix is what we need, what I hope for, and both in regard to us as human beings and nature and our relationship, human beings to nature. And I got back in touch with those ornithology friends from college and said, did anybody ever study this to see what the birds, what happened to the birds, what they do, what is it that clicks? And nobody seemed to know. And so I, partly out of curiosity, I thought, well, if nobody knows, then I want to try and see. So I got a super high-speed camera to be able to get very slow motion. So partly I just wanted to see what would happen in that moment. And partly I wanted to show other people this phenomenon in a symbolic way, as sort of a metaphor for possibility, and the possibility of a moment of change. And that was in 2019, and I feel like so since then it did spark refocusing on birds in particular. I've made a few other videos that have to do with birds. I feel like they're good symbolic characters for us, because people tend to be very sympathetic to them. And we have a long history in archaeological objects, in art, in design, of using birds for design and for metaphoric meaning. So this piece was sort of a beginning of a whole group of works that I've been making since then that use birds in kind of an allegorical way, similar to the idea of the phoenix.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I think we are just running a little over time, but let's end with a high note, but it's also a very ironical note. So can we screen the next video, please?
Woo! All right. We came tonight to dance. What? We came tonight to dance. Right. We came tonight to dance. This is a little story that my grandpa used to tell me about this beautiful place called Managua, Nicaragua. This is dedicated to all my people down there in Nicaragua. This is the hour man, right? Oh, to the left and right, to the left and right, to the left and right, to the left and right. We came tonight to dance, tonight to dance. We're gonna dance this song called Managua, Nicaragua, right? They told me that Managua, Nicaragua was a beautiful town. Comprabas una hacienda for few pesos down. Then you could give it to the lady you were trying to win. And there her papa, he would let you come in. I said he will. And they told me to. Managua, Nicaragua was a wonderful spot. Coffee and bananas, calorcito hot. You took a trip, no longer cheap. Sailing away across the agua to Managua, Nicaragua, ole. To Managua, ole. Ole. Across the agua to Managua, Nicaragua, to Managua, Nicaragua, to Managua, Nicaragua, ole. Ole. To Managua, Nicaragua, ole. Yeah. To Managua, Nicaragua, ole. Managua, Nicaragua, ole, love. To Managua, Nicaragua, ole, right. To Managua, Nicaragua, ole, left. To Managua, Nicaragua, ole, right. To Managua, Nicaragua. Managua, Nicaragua was a heavenly place before the terremoto, the good old days. Lots of nice señoritas for a little embrace. You wouldn't believe this place. That was Managua, Nicaragua, Nicaragua, ole. Comíamos mondongo, bailando songo, muchas tortillas y chiles congos. We never stop. Every day was fiesta. You just needed to wait. Después de la siesta, that was Managua, Nicaragua, ole, 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 across the agua to Managua, Nicaragua, to Managua, Nicaragua, to Managua, Nicaragua, ole, ole, look, to Managua, Nicaragua, ole, right, to Managua, Nicaragua, ole, left, to Managua, Nicaragua, ole. To Managua, Nicaragua. I love Managua, Nicaragua. Right. This is for all my people down there in Managua, Nicaragua. Peace.
Okay. So I'm always, I have this smile until I sort of get reminded of how this addresses, these painful stereotypes about so-called banana republics that still remain down there. So can you talk about this work, how it came about? I understand it became viral, and this is way before social media. Yeah.
Yeah, in Nicaragua, it sort of became sort of a hit. I was invited to make a work. It's sort of a response to what happens when you get invited as to a country that you don't really know that well to make a work. Like, come visit Managua, stay for a week. We'll give you a small tour, and then you have to make some sort of deep, poignant work about a place that you don't really know, and it has to be a public work. So, because it was like it was called Habitat, and it's a sort of public art exhibition, curated by Emiliano Valdez, and funded by the Spanish cooperation. Sort of like, I guess, the equivalent of USAID, but from Spain. So I live next to the airport. Hold on, please. And so, there wasn't much of a budget. And then, so how do you make a work, that isn't sort of frivolous and superficial in a small period of time about a place that you don't really know well, and then make it a public work that doesn't get absorbed by a bustling, complex, urban center. And so the answer to that was, I'm going to make a song which it can occupy a lot of space, but won't require that with much of so I was able to do it within the budget, the constraints of the budget, and it could have a lot farther reach than maybe more of a sculptural or static work that wasn't going to be able to be very, big or prominent, or I wasn't going to be able to, produce this like large thing that wouldn't be absorbed by a city. Most people, when they don't see something in a city that they don't recognize, they often think it's like some sort of advertisement teaser, or they don't recognize it necessarily as art. It just gets sort of engulfed by the context, and sort of either overlooked or misunderstood, and so that was the reason why I chose to make a song. And then when I was sort of investigating what song could it be, an original song or this and that, I was talking to some people from Managua, and one of them played this song for me, but not the original version. It was what he thought was the original version. And I was, that's really interesting. I mean, why these lyrics? Why this and that? And I sort of investigating, and most Nicaraguans, people from Nicaragua, don't know that the original version is actually a foxtrot by Guy Lombardo, written and produced in the 1920s, and it was just filled with these sort of stereotypical notions that gringos have of Spanish-speaking countries or Spanish-speaking peoples, where they say "ole," but they think that they're talking about Mexico, and then bananas and coffee. They have this sort of abstract idea of what all these countries south of their border are, and it sort of gets mixed. Sort of the way people think about Africa, like yeah, over in Africa, but Africa could be Namibia, or it could be Libya, or it could be Botswana, or I mean, it's a huge continent with many different countries, and within those countries, which are sort of artificially designated areas, borders, there's all these ethnicities and different peoples and tribes, and we have absolutely almost no understanding of what all those places are really about, and sort of we have all these sort of commonplace, very sort of not sometimes malignant, and sometimes just out of ignorance, cliches and misconceptions that we reduce the people to sort of caricatures, right? And of course, there's in the original song, there's a lot of misogyny. There's a lot of like the colonial idea of you just come to this place and it's going to open its doors to you, and you're going to have it's like you're going to be able to take advantage of all this of its economy and its people and so forth. And so what I did is I decided to sort of make a remix of it, and because originally it's in the foxtrot genre, and so I have a lot of musician friends that I work with and collaborate with, and I played them the original song. I said, let's make sort of like a reggaeton or like a rap version of this, and that was the project. And the project itself was sort of to infiltrate the Managua, the Nicaraguan airwaves, right? So I went back to Nicaragua, and then I would visit radio stations, and I made up this fake artist, Awaman, which is sort of a play like Yellow Man, or sort of a lot of dancehall reggae artists have the word man at the end of some other thing, like Chinese man or Yellow Man. So I made up this fake artist who was called Awaman, which is like an inversion of Managua. And I would go and visit radio stations like, this is my new single, and it's Managua, Nicaragua. And since, the people of Nicaragua were like, oh, yeah, we know that song, wow. And we would talk about it, and they would instantly connect because it talks about their country. It started to become very popular. And I went to discos, and I would hand it to DJs. I went to radio stations and did interviews. And I decided to make like a lyric video because there wasn't much of a budget to make an actual music video. So I made this lyric video, but since the lyrics were so important to the work, it's actually worked out. And I posted it on YouTube, and I started getting a lot of views, at least within the context that I was interested in, which was Nicaragua. A little bit outside, but mostly there. And to this day, I still get like comments and views from people in Nicaragua. Like, I sort of identify with the song, enjoy it, because it's danceable, it's enjoyable. So that's pretty much it.
Thank you, Jonathan. I think we have only a few minutes for questions. So this is one from Estrellita Brodsky. You have spoken about the sociopolitical, but much of your work has been about the environment and nature, even dating back, as I recall, to Donna's senior thesis at Skowhegan, and more recently, Coexistencia. Can you speak about that focus of your work?
It's definitely something that I feel like is more and more, with each passing day, more and more important to focus on myself. As far as the individual work and the collaborative work, I feel like all these crises are intertwined. So part of any social economic crisis is also an environmental crisis. They're not things that are separated. So I think these themes all intertwine, and a lot of the work is about consumption and accumulation, and that's an environmental issue, and also human social issues. So yeah, thanks. It's definitely a theme. It's always been a theme. It will continue to be a theme because we can't ignore it.
Here's a question from Marina Isgro, one of my colleagues at the Hirshhorn. Inanimate objects take center stage in your videos. And when humans appear, it's usually as an isolated hand or arm that puts other things in motion. Can you tell us about this approach?
I can go first, Jonathan. You can add to it, but I think it's an easy thing to do because we have our hands available to us as actors. The work isn't necessarily about us as individuals. So for the most part, although in Drinking Song you see a little bit of our profile, for the most part, our faces aren't in the works because the work is more general. And so if the hands are in there, it speaks to the artist, the person, it speaks to the audience. It's me, it's you. And I think that it helps people maybe relate to the actions or the role of the people in a generalized way.
Okay.
Yeah, that said, we just briefly, we did have to eventually take into account the fact that I'm a white guy and my hands are white, and Donna is brown. She's Chicana, mestiza. So people, we had to recognize that people were going to read into that. So if we ignored it, it would sort of be to our detriment. So when we're in a video, like for example, we haven't seen it today, but like invisible hands. Since I have the white guy hands, I play sort of the white guy in general terms of the power dynamics that video is about. And in other videos, we realized that early on because of the way people interpreted the videos themselves. They would start to sort of read meanings into it that we hadn't intentionally placed in or injected the videos with. But realize, oh, they're thinking that because I have male hands, duh. Or they're thinking that because you have brown hands, duh. So sort of by paying attention to what people read in our works, even if it was an intentional thing or not, at least on our end, we started realize, okay, so we have to be really savvy about and recognize and where we're coming from and what it means to have place ourselves in the videos, being who we are, right?
And I think it has to do with culpability. And so if we're pointing to things that we think are problems, I think it's important to say, yeah, we're part of the problem, not just pointing fingers. So
yeah.
We run a little late. I'm sorry about that. I could continue, talking to you for hours, and I hope we will.
I think there's maybe one last Q&A. I mean, can we do the last one?
Yes. So there is a question by Ira Tat. Can you describe the path of the video? I think we're talking about domino effect. Is this a path for residents, tourists, or an unlikely walk?
yes, you can walk the walk of the bricks. That was important to us. So it starts at Casco Viejo. The old quarters was at one point when it was a Spanish city, it was walled. And so we started at the wall and went all the way to the ocean. It was like a fortified city. And we wanted to make sure that it was really a path that you could walk. So yes.
Okay, well, I thank you for agreeing to do this conversation. I hope we continue it soon. And thank you, all of the attendees of this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks to you. Thanks, Hirshhorn.